Welcome back to the iSax.Academy. I'm Alistair Parnell, and this one's a bit of a special one for you today. It's an interview with the great Matt Traum. We're going to find out how Matt started off on the trumpet, how he built his first synthesizer, and of course how he developed into probably the best known resource for wind synth sounds in the world, played by pretty much all the top wind synth players in the world. And actually, this is a bit of an insight into what goes on in the iSax.Academy. It's just an extract from one of our live webinars, which we do each month. If you want more information about the courses on offer, and there are some special deals on at the moment, you know why, please check out the link in the description below. Just visit iSax.Academy, you'll find out all about those courses there. I'm also going to offer very soon a new membership subscription. It will give you access to all of the past webinars and the future webinars as long as you want to subscribe to that membership. And in those webinars, we join together, aerophone players from all over the world. I take you through various news items. There are tons of tutorials there on all aspects of aerophone playing. And of course, there's quite a lot of demonstrating that I do on the aerophone as well. It's a fabulous time. It's a wonderful community. I'd love you to come and join us. But for now, let's hear this interview. Matt Traum, I'm so pleased to have you with us and joining the show tonight. And this is something I've wanted to do for quite a long time. We've been friends for, I don't know, how long now? I mean, it's been a while since we...
Oh, many years. I don't know how far back it goes. I think you were a customer before we actually got to know each other a little better.
Exactly. No, that's right. So,
that's a good question.
We've had some quite good contact over the years, including some pretty long phone calls, which we won't talk about now. Some of those cost me a lot of money because I did it wrong.
I heard about that.
So
we learned a lesson there.
It's great to have you. So I just thought it would be really interesting for some of the iSax people to just know a little bit about Matt Traum, the person. Obviously, we all know about your content online and the fantastic stuff that you do through Patchman. It's absolutely the authority on wind synth sounds, right? So we all know about you, but we don't know about you as a person. And I think it would be kind of interesting to just find out a little bit more about you, and maybe we'll chat and you'll find out about me as well. So
I don't know why anybody wants to know about me, but I'll be happy to talk. Thanks for having me. I appreciate this.
It's absolute pleasure. So let's begin with where things started for you. What's your kind of musical background? I mean, was music in the family, or where did things start off?
Well, not formally in the family, although I would say my parents have really good musical taste. They used to play some great jazz, and I was young, a few years old. I remember records by, first thing that got me was Herb Alpert and, the Tijuana Brass back in the early 60s, and Al Hirt with his Java. You remember that song is really big instrumental.
Yeah.
Instrumental hits back when instrumental hits were in the top 40.
Sure.
I remember dancing to that and hearing the trumpet. So both of those guys were inspiration for me to get started on wanting to be a trumpet player. It was just fun music. It was enjoyable.
And were you straight into the trumpet? Did you play anything else? You did some piano or anything? It was straight into trumpet?
No, it was straight to the trumpet in fifth grade, 1973, I think it was. I had a nun. I went to Catholic school for 8 years, and she was a saint. Right. She did the best she could. She taught all the instruments and did everything all by herself for all of us for fifth through eighth grade. So I started on trumpet, and there was no question that was what I wanted. And I remember eighth grade, I played euphonium. Actually, I picked that up because I thought that was kind of cool. It was the same fingering as a trumpet.
Yeah.
So I learned that in eighth grade. I think I played in the band in eighth grade. I played in the honors band, and in high school, of course, I played trumpet. Taught myself trombone in my middle years in high school, and played in the marching band the middle 2 years there on trombone because they needed trombone players.
Right.
played trumpet on freshman and senior year. Played trumpet all the way through high school. But as a secondary instrument, I played in the jazz ensemble on the second jazz ensemble on trombone. We had a great program at high school, by the way. We had a young guy who just got his master's out of college. His first year teaching was my first year as a freshman at Lakewood High School in Ohio here in the U.S. Jim Warwick, and one of the great teachers of all time, I would say, music teachers. And he went on to do great things at a school called New Trier High School in the Chicago area, Chicago, Illinois. And up there, after he left a few years after I graduated high school, and he went there and started an amazing jazz program there. And they had video production. The students were running video productions. They were streaming concerts by the other kids. This was back in the early 90s, maybe mid 90s. So it was really advanced. He's a wonderful guy. Can't say enough about him. And he gave me so much encouragement and confidence in myself. And high school, I was in the marching band, the jazz band, the orchestra, the wind ensemble. My favorite was the jazz combo. Of course, that's where everybody's a soloist.
Yes.
So love that, even though it was I think it was only senior year in high school, but that was, I still think fondly back on those days.
Sure.
And we did recordings. We went to recording studios. We recorded the jazz ensemble. We did actually I think it was sophomore year in high school, one of the first digital recordings ever.
Okay.
Company everybody's heard of as Telarc. They were digital recording. They were based out of Cleveland here. And before they were Telarc, I think it was they were called Advent Recording, if I'm not mistaken. And they it was the same guys as Telarc, but they were starting to do digital recording. And so our wind ensemble, this probably would have been 1977, possibly. We did a digital recording of the wind ensemble.
Wow.
And it was released on a LP, of course.
Sure.
But it sounded incredible. For the time, it was very advanced. And I remember that editing wasn't...
Do you still have a copy of it then?
I do, actually. I posted it on YouTube. I digitized it and put it up there for all my fellow students and people. It's on YouTube. If you search Lakewood High School Wind Ensemble, Matt Traum, it'll probably pop up. I think that one was like a red cover.
Okay.
Red and black cover. But it's up there. Technically, it was pretty advanced. I remember they couldn't do a lot of editing. Editing was very tricky back in the early days of digital because it was
so you had to play properly.
Digital format.
You couldn't cheat.
Yeah, I had to play it through. They were able to do a few cuts, but it had to be. There were certain ways you had to do it. I think you had to have silence. Sure. Room in there. Oh, so one of the summers in high school, they allowed me to take home the school's synthesizer. It was an Electrocomp EML 101, old analogs, old school one-note polyphony to analog synth, and they had a 4-track TAC, reel-to-reel multi-channel.
Yeah.
So they let me take it home for the summer, and so I was like, I never could have had access to anything. It was expensive stuff.
Sure.
So I had that at home. I was doing multi-track recordings with the synthesizer, learning a little bit synthesis. I had no idea what the knobs did. I was just experimenting, and I would do. I'd go and find some 4-part Bach chorales and things, or little simple arrangements, and play them all on the keyboard, one line at a time.
Build up the tracks
times 4. Multi-track, and I even did some bouncing where I went a couple tracks over and then added a couple more.
Yeah.
I still have those recordings on cassette. So that was fun. And another thing he did was Jim Warwick asked me to do a sound effects tape that would be playing as the marching band was doing their version of Star Wars at the time. It was Star Wars was a big deal.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, can you do some sound effects that'll be synced to the performance on the field?
Right.
So I did this multi-track recording, and they had a recording they played during halftime at the football game.
Oh, okay.
And marching band was playing Star Wars, and that was pretty cool. That was pretty advanced stuff for the time, I would say.
Fantastic.
Syncing up live. It's done all the time now.
Yeah, of course.
Live performance with backing tracks, but not then.
So that was really the start of your kind of looking into synthesis, right? On that keyboard.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
So senior year, I think it was, in music theory class, we used that same setup, the multi-track and the synthesizer. Our project was for the advanced music theory was to do a recording, an electronic music recording composition.
Yeah.
And Jerry Wondrak was the teacher, great teacher. Again, he was a pioneer. I'll say a few things about him in a second. But so I did a recording, and that was probably the first time I used my acoustic trumpet with that recording. There was an input on the synthesizer where you could plug a mic in and then play, and then you have the filter going, affecting the sound of my trumpet.
Sure.
So those were the early thoughts where I was trying to incorporate trumpet playing and synthesis. I think that was the very first thing that I can think of.
Right.
That goes back. And so I did that recording, and he actually used that as an example for the classes. He gave me an A+ example on the class.
Okay.
Here's how to do it, kids. And it was very encouraging. I believe he started the jazz choir program at Lakewood High School around the time I was there. And that was one of the first, they called it the Lakewood Roadshow. And it was one of the first jazz choirs, where it was a small choir with a jazz combo on the side. So it was, I don't know, maybe 20 singers and then a jazz combo. And that group over the years, Downbeat magazine, the jazz magazine, they won many years the best recording in the whole country.
Wow.
Under his direction.
Wow.
Between him and James Warwick, I was very fortunate to have
absolutely
this education
yes, yeah,
Lakewood,
yeah,
Ohio here.
Yeah. So you got this keyboard from school, high school, whatever you called it, and then so where did you go after that? Kind of looking toward the wind synthesis thing. Where does that lead you?
Well, the intermediate step before the wind synthesis would be I wanted to have my own synthesizer. And of course, I could not afford one. Even the early analog synthesizers were way out of range. Moog and Electrocomp and ARP, those companies.
Yes.
So I said, well, maybe I can build one. So there's a company, Radio Shack. I don't know what you had in England.
I know of it.
Tandy.
Yes, Tandy, yes, or Maplin it became. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So you could go there and buy chips and parts and resistors and stuff. And they had a little sound chip that was made by Texas Instruments in the time that was kind of a synthesizer. So I said, well, let's try that. And there were books out by Forrest Mims.
Right.
I hope I have his name correct. He wrote a series of books for Radio Shack that taught electronics for workbooks and stuff like that.
Sure.
So anyway, I followed the plans and made a synthesizer. The first one was on a piece of plywood about a 1/4 inch thick, and it had nails popping through it. And as patch points, that I used alligator clips to connect an oscillator.
Wow. And
on the back, there was all kinds of wires connected to this Texas Instruments chip. And it was very crude. It was just a sound effects type thing. There was no keyboard or anything. It was just knobs to make sound effects. So I learned that. Later on, I revised that. I took it into a Tupperware container. It was like this big, and then I put some switches on there and knobs and stuff, and the inside of it was just a whole.
But what a great way to learn. I mean, literally hands-on, right? I mean, it was there under your fingers. Everything you did, you had to put together with wires and nails and stuff. What a great way to learn. Great way to learn. Yeah, brilliant. Okay.
So as far as getting into wind synth, I was always looking for trumpet and synthesizer ways to do it. I didn't know about Niall Steiner. I had no idea that he existed. I didn't know that anything like that was being worked on, and it was over in California. He was working on these things at about that same time. The early 1970s, I think, is when he started with his first EVIs, fully analog, that would interface to a mini Moog or an ARP synthesizer. Very simple switches, just on-off on the breath sensor. There was no proportional levels of breath. Very simple, but it controlled like a mini Moog, instead of a keyboard. So a trumpet player could play it. But this was mid-70s that he was already working on this. Before I even knew about it, I was at college at Ohio State. A fellow named Brian Gaber was, we had a little jam session that was every Thursday night at one of the local restaurants, the hamburger place, and we'd go in there and set up and play, run by the students. One time, a guy named Brian Gaber came in, a student, and he had a Krumar EVI, which that instrument came out around 1980. It was designed by Niall Steiner, and it was an electronic trumpet.
Right.
And he was playing it at the jazz jam. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. I didn't this was like a dream come true. I didn't know that existed. And he was playing it well. He's a great player, jazz player, and he teaches now at Florida State University, a contemporary music teacher, and teaches this kind of thing. But he was the very first connection to an electronic trumpet type wind controller or wind controller of any kind for me. Yeah, I was very impressed by that.
So did he let you try it out, or?
No, but he showed it to me. I think I probably chickened out, right? I didn't. I would have sounded horrible, but he sounded great. He was playing jazz, like real music. Wasn't sound effects or anything.
Sure.
So, but he showed it to me and said, "Here's how it works. Here's what it does. The canister, and and it wasn't until that would have been about 1984, maybe 80. Okay. Yeah, probably about 84 that I saw that.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 1989 that I got my first wind controller, and that was just at random. Sam Ash in New York, big music company.
I know it. Yeah. I've been there.
Retailer.
Yeah.
They had a blowout on the Akai EVI 1000 and the EWI 1000 and the corresponding sound module, the EWV 2000, because they weren't selling. They came out in 1987. 2 years later, they're already blowing them out because nobody bought them.
Wow.
There was no internet. Nobody knew what these were. You couldn't go to a store and see somebody playing an EVI. What are the chances of finding somebody that knows how to play it?
Absolutely.
So it was very difficult to sell those things back then. Of course, now we have the internet and YouTube, and you can go see it. And $325, $350,
right,
for an EVI.
Wow.
One heck of a deal. How could I pass that up? So that was a reasonable amount of money that I could afford, and I got it. And my life changed from that moment on. I remember the very first notes I played on that instrument, sitting there, and I was like, wow, this is it's frustrating because I want to play it and I can't, because you got the left hand to deal with.
Sure.
Where you don't have that on a trumpet. It's just the right hand.
Sure.
But I remember playing it, and I would say about 5 weeks later, I recorded a track, a little improvised track. I actually have it up on my website. If you want to hear it, I was using the Akai EVI 1000, and I think I had it connected up to an Oberheim Matrix 1000 with some wind controller sounds that I did, some early sounds. Okay. So it took a few weeks to kind of where I could play it, and then I would say about there's a little bit of a difference because you got both hands, and so some of the fingerings are a little different than trumpet.
Sure.
It took me about a year before I didn't have to think about it anymore. And, because I would be a little confused going back and forth between acoustic trumpet and the electronic valve instrument. Yeah. The EVI.
Yeah.
D is like this always on an EVI, whereas it's like this or this on a trumpet, depending on what range you're in.
Okay.
After about a year, I was good to go, and my life changed, and I was very interested in exploring that and seeing what kind of sounds could be made and how realistic I can get sounds.
Yeah.
Eventually, when synthesizers got better, samplers came in, you could get pretty realistic timbres and nice control over the.
At what point then did you get into actually thinking, well, okay, I've got something here that I could begin to market as a kind of, was it long after that you started kind of marketing your sounds, or?
I started marketing sounds before I got into wind controllers. I started Patchman Music in 85. Late 84, 85. Right. So my first sound banks came out in 1985. I started on the Casio CZ101, which was the first really affordable, programmable digital synth, very reasonably priced. So I bought one of those, and I did four full banks of sounds. I used to sell them in little booklets. For $19.95. The booklets I'd print them up at a local printer, and then people would open them up and find all the numbers for a certain patch, and they'd have to punch in all the numbers.
Sure.
And then they'd have their synth lead sound or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had booklets, and then eventually it became SysX files, so you could just dump in a file through a computer instantaneously, which saved a tremendous amount of time.
And so did that then become, your main kind of working life, as it were? Did that take over? Were you still playing? Were you earning money from playing? How was that? What was your week looking like?
Out of college was 85. I worked at a recording studio called Commercial Recording here in the Cleveland area,
right?
In Ohio, and I was editing tapes, literally reel-to-reel tapes, slicing them with the razor blade and putting commercials together and pulling words out and moving words and trimming. and then dubbing tapes, and they would go out to radio stations all over the country, actually.
Right.
And I did that for about a year, and I was starting my patch business then, and eventually got to the point where I was making more than I was making working all week at the studio, and I said, let's try it, let's go for it, and I did that.
And are you out doing some gigs sometimes? Now do you do some playing but most of your work is kind of the Patchman sounds, right?
It is, yeah. I used to do a lot more playing. I had some groups that were pretty well known in town here, all occasion groups, weddings, social events, holidays, things like that. And it was very good groups. I played bass guitar also. I didn't mention that. Taught myself bass in college because I figured there might be some work in there more than for trumpet players. So
sure.
So I was leading groups, arranging for the groups, and also doing the business, also the Patchman business.
Right.
Eventually, I got into more jazz playing with the jazz trio, jazz quartets, jazz duos. Yeah. Nowadays, I'm not doing a whole lot. I'd like to do more at some point, but I'm happy. I'm busy.
But you were doing gigs playing both acoustic trumpet and EVI, right? Is that you mixed it up?
That's correct. Yeah. With the larger group for the all occasion band type thing, it was more bass guitar and acoustic trumpet, a little bit of singing, and then with the jazz groups, it was all electronic valve instrument, EVI.
Right.
So it was myself on the EVI. I had a keyboard player who would play key bass and keyboards in the right hand, so he would do the role of two instruments, and then a drummer. So there's a lot of videos up on YouTube if you're curious.
Presumably you are favorite trumpet players, but I guess we're more interested in, do you have some favorite Synth players that you admire? I mean, there are lots of them, right? Most of them are playing your sounds. So.
Oh, yeah. So as far as Synth players, of course, Niall Steiner is the godfather of this whole thing for me. He's the inventor of the EVI and the EWI for the woodwind players.
Yeah.
Before that was Bill Bernardi with the Lyricon, but he was a musician, but he didn't perform that I know of. Yeah. He was more of the engineering side of it. But yeah, Niall Steiner, Judd Miller, he's a good friend. Both these guys,
great. I love
friends
Judd
of mine.
Miller.
Judd Miller,
yeah, lovely stuff.
I mean, these guys both of them played on numerous soundtracks for movies and other musical artists.
Yes,
and it's all over the place. Yeah. I have tribute pages for Niall Steiner, Judd Miller.
Yeah.
Another guy named Steve Taviglione.
Oh, yes.
I have a tribute for him. He's done a lot, and he's still doing a lot with EWI.
Yeah. Yeah. I often say to people that, the chances are you've heard these guys playing, you just never realized you did. Because, I mean, the list of films, you have them on your Patchman site, I think. I mean, it's just an incredible amount of appearances there. And it's stuff we've all probably seen in the cinema or whatever, and we just didn't know it was a Synth playing. It's amazing.
Yeah,
so,
for some reason, the wind controllers were really popular in the studios in Hollywood.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess because they were so versatile and they were unusual and
expressive, right? I mean, it's a different expressive quality to a keyboard, you know. So
you wouldn't believe the movies
absolutely
that you've heard.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, would it be difficult for you to kind of narrow down a few tracks that you would say they were the tracks for you, or I mean, everybody talks about the Brecker Sentimental Mood, of course. Yeah. I mean, that's always pretty much the top of everybody's list or near the top, but I mean, there's so much more. Do you have any current kind of tracks that you would?
Yeah, anything Michael Brecker with Steps Ahead, his group called Steps Ahead.
Yeah.
Just check him out on YouTube, and he's doing amazing stuff on EWI. He does looping things where he's a one-man band, and it's unreal. Bob Mintzer, of course.
Yellow Jackets.
He's a good friend of mine. He's been using my EWI 4000 sounds ever since he got it, I think, exclusively since 2006. Every recording you hear him playing EWI or performance, that's one of the sounds that's in my sound bank that's available to everybody.
Lovely stuff, yes.
Through Patchman Music. Yes. But he's got a really interesting thing recently. It was called the big band bluegrass.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw that, Alistair.
I did see that.
It's come and gone off of YouTube. They pulled it and brought it back, and I downloaded it because it's incredible. It's like a bluegrass arrangements featuring big band and iwi.
Yes.
Believe it or not. Yeah. And it's with the WDR big band. I should mention Judd Miller. If you're looking on YouTube, go to look up Judd Miller Stretch, STRETCH, 1986.
Okay. Right.
There's a song called Summer Waltz that he does. It's really beautiful. It's kind of a crude recording. It's a video, but really cool stuff. And there's another one where he played Wichita Lineman, Jimmy Webb's Wichita Lineman.
I love that track. Love that track.
Judd's just a master.
Yes. And so because I recorded that a while back for my YouTube. Well,
yes.
It's, goodness, probably 6 or 8 years ago now. But that was just because I heard Judd playing it. I thought, what a beautiful track to play. And it was just amazing to hear that. Yeah.
So you did hear Judd's version?
Oh, definitely. That was the inspiration. Yes.
Yeah, he's sitting outside in some festival and he's playing.
Yes. Would you have a kind of top 3 sort of, suggestions or recommendations in terms of what do you think is important for a wind synth player, in terms of how we play, what would be your advice?
One needs to understand that the wind controller isn't really a gimmick or a toy. It's an actual instrument that, it's to be learned like any other instrument.
Sure.
And some people treat it as though it's just a novelty and don't take it seriously. And if they don't take it seriously, the audience isn't going to take it seriously.
Sure.
It's important to have good sounds in the wind controller also.
Yep.
If you're playing cheesy sounds that don't respond to breath and if they sound horrible, nobody's going to like it.
No.
So it's important to seek that out. Of course, that's something I specialize in at Patchman Music.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Anybody can contact me. I'm happy to help them get them sorted out with some good stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's important to sound good and to play well and learn it and take it seriously. And if you're trying to, you can't just plug it in and play a keyboard-oriented sound. Like if you buy a synthesizer at the music shop and hook it up to a Korg or whatever, it's programmed to respond to velocity on a keyboard, just on and off. And it's like a drum. You hit it hard, you hit it soft, but that's it. There's no control after you hit it. And whereas with wind controllers, you need continuous control. It's not so much about how you attack a sound, but what you do once you hit it. And you can swell and bend and all kinds of fun things. Mm-hmm. So, and if you're emulating, try to stay within the range of the instrument that you're emulating, like a violin or a trumpet. You don't want to go super, super, super high or super low.
Yep.
It won't sound right because a trumpet can't play there anyway. So the other thing I find with a lot of people that are new is they blow too hard into wind controllers. And that's one of the things I appreciate about your playing, Alistair, how you play it musically and you understand, of course, you don't blow really hard and top off the level of the breath sensor. You know, the breath sensor can only go so far, then it stops. It goes from nothing to full, and there's only 128 steps there for the most part.
It strikes me. We hear even some demos or stuff on YouTube with wind synth players, and I kind of think, well, what you just did there, that could have been done on a keyboard. That's not to be derogatory to keyboard players, but you're not actually using a wind synth to give us that shape after you've hit the sound. Everything is just topping out, and you might as well just do that on a synth, right? And so, you're absolutely right. The whole dynamic range thing is something that very often gets overlooked or completely forgotten about with some cases, I think. So it's a shame.
I think it's important to play within the range and well within the range, not just at the top level. And it'll just sound much better. And if you have to, turn the volume up a little higher.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes. That way, it's loud enough in the middle, and then when you play loud, it's going to be nice and loud. If you listen to a trumpet in the same room, it's an awfully loud instrument.
Yes.
Even a saxophone is pretty loud. You know?
Absolutely.
A lot of people, you need to turn your amp high enough so that it's kind of matching an acoustic instrument level. If you're trying to fit in with a group, maybe pull off the reverb and the effects.
Yes.
If you have a flute sound or a clarinet or a sax or trumpet on your wind controller, and you've got all these effects built in, and you're trying to match with a guy standing next to you that plays the trumpet or something, you're going to stand out with all those effects on there. So pull it all out, make it dry, and match what he's doing, and put a speaker right behind you so that the sound is local and coming from you.
Yeah, good
instead
one.
Good one. A that's 30 feet away.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the other thing, is it's really important to have a good monitor,
of course,
right by, as close to your head as possible. Or
yes.
very close by, that you're in control of, that you can get just that right volume level.
Yeah.
And you don't want to rely on a sound guy for your monitor. Let them do what they have to do for the PA, but for monitoring, it's really important, especially with a wind controller. There's no sound, like you have coming out of the bell of a sax or trumpet.
Sure.
The monitor is the instrument,
as
much as the wind controller is. So,
what would be Matt Traum's kind of ultimate kind of instrument? Do you have such a thing in mind, or?
Well, as a trumpet player, I'd love to see a trumpet-style wind controller come out. Of course, so most of the newer wind controllers that have come out over the last, 6-7 years have brass fingering systems in there, but it looks like a woodwind still, but it can be played like a brass instrument, more or less. I'd like to see, I like the canister style of the EVI that Niall originally came up with over 50 years ago.
Yes, yeah.
So it's a brilliant design. It takes a little getting used to, but there's reasons for what he did, and Niall is no slouch, and he studied it and refined it. So I'd like to see more wind instruments that come out, maybe make a clarinet type wind controller, or of course a brass wind controller is my thing, or flute wind controller, or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the woodwinds are, would you say they're pretty well covered? I mean, they're pretty much all woodwind style at this point.
We could do with some more brass, certainly, couldn't we? Yes. Yeah,
I mean, I think there's as many brass players as there are sax players. I could be wrong, but I think there's a huge market there. One thing I'd like to say is, the SWAM instruments by Audio Modeling, I think, are fantastic.
Yeah.
They're so responsive, and they're doing some things that have never been done before.
Yes.
I'd like to see that incorporated inside a wind controller. Like, a Yamaha WX with built-in SWAM instruments would be unbelievable. Or Roland, or whoever wants to do it.
Yes.
License it and put it in there.
Yes.
I mean, it'd be hard to beat that.
There's a lot of people asking for that. Yeah. I don't know how possible that is. It strikes me, if you can put the SWAM instruments into an iPhone, you would think there might be some way of putting it
I'm sure it can be done.
A wind synth.
Another thing I'd like to mention is, as far as synthesis, it's really important when you're dealing with samples, and the audio modeling stuff avoids these problems. But when you're dealing with samples, you want to have legato really well thought out. So when you slur a note using a sample, you don't want to hear that attack of the, playing a trumpet sound, you attack it, and you're slurring. You don't want to hear that attack when you're slurring, because that's not what happens on a trumpet. It should just go to the next note and bypass the attack. Yeah. So Akai did that with the EWI 5000 and EWI US or EWI Solo in their synth engine. They did a pretty good job of that.
Yeah.
I'd like to see Roland maybe dig into that a little more. It can be done with just very few tweaks.
Right.
I mean, it's already incredibly powerful. Roland's, the Aerophone 20, AE30 are absolutely amazing. And they with the Supernatural, they have the analog modeling, they've got the sample playback.
Yep.
And the beauty of all that is you can layer those things all within one sound, one scene.
Yes.
So can make tremendous huge sounds, layers that are so creative, and there's by far the Roland Aerophone AE20 and AE30 are the most powerful wind controllers ever made.
Built-in synths, absolutely, yes.
I would argue it against anything I've ever worked on. They're very powerful, and they continue to develop them and add features and tweak it, and even the hardware's been tweaked, the keys and little things. It's really, Roland's doing a wonderful job. In the last 7 years, I think I counted 7 models that they've come out with, and there may be more than that if you count the alternate color ones that they have. Yes. So it's at least 7 models in 7 years, and they've gone from not having any wind controller to being, I would say, probably the leader now in wind controller technology.
And so, I mean, really, before we wind this up, we ought to just make sure everybody knows, where exactly do we find you on the internet?
Patchmanmusic.com. You know, I sell wind controllers from Akai and Roland and Yamaha, and lots of sounds that are designed to work with wind controllers. I do repairs also. That's a lot of my time, by the way, that my daily time is doing a lot of repairs. I have also a Patchman Music group on Facebook. I have a Matt Traum group, Matt Traum name on Facebook, and also a wind controller group on Facebook.
Yes.
Another thing I've started doing is restoration of video and audio and documents. I've been working with Dr. Tom Ray, who is a retired professor from Berklee College of Music in Boston.
Right.
He used to teach music synthesis and music technology, and he's working on a book, actually. Been doing some restoration work for him, some old videos of things with Bob Moog and Max Matthews and things. These fellows are now deceased, you know.
Sure.
We're restoring some videos that are just in horrible condition and getting them to where you can view them now on YouTube. And so we had drtomray.com, I think is his website. And then my restoration for media is called mattstimemachine.com.
Oh, okay. Right. I haven't checked that one out yet.
It's kind of a side hobby of mine. I enjoy working with video. I always liken it to my sight being restored. You know, I've been working with audio my whole life, and that's all non-visual.
Yes.
And to work with audio and visual at the same time, it's kind of a strange experience.
Well, look, I think we've had a great little session with you, and we thank you so much for joining us. It's been really interesting just to see what goes on there, you know, behind the website, as it were, because we just don't get to find these things out. And I'm sure a lot of people find it tremendously interesting. So, and we should do this again sometime. I'm sure there'll be kind of new models or something coming out, and maybe we can have another chat and invite you back in again to talk through future developments. And
I would love to.
Yeah, that would be absolutely great.
Thank you so much for having me, and this is fun. And
absolutely.
Hope I didn't talk too long.
No, not at all. It's all been very, very interesting. So, so for now, anyway, Matt, thank you so much, and I hope we talk again soon.
Thanks again. Take care.